The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. The Occupy Wall Street movement has gone from Wall Street to cities all over the nation to cities all over the world. And it has also landed right here in the borough of the Bronx in the formal form of Occupy the Bronx. This phenomenon has captured the imagination of many. And tonight we'll meet one of the Occupy the Bronx organizers, and we'll also talk about a range of issues with him. As often happens with protest movements, there's an accompanying chorus of charges that the police response has not been proper. We also have a Monroe College criminal justice professor who's retired from a 21-year career as an NYPD sergeant. He'll help us evaluate some of the disturbing videos that we've seen and the police response overall. And we'll take your phone calls about Occupy the Bronx. Call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email your comments or questions to BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. So, from Occupy the Bronx, good evening to Ephraim Cruz. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
And from the Monroe College School of Criminal Justice, Professor Augustine Aloya. Thank you, Professor.
Thank
you for
Thanks for
joining
having
us.
me.
Ephraim, let's start with you. Why have you been so passionate about Occupy Wall Street and now converted it to Occupy the Bronx?
Well, I put it to folks this way. We've had a running of the bulls, if you will, of banksters, which Occupy Wall Street has been, putting their hands on the horns of those bulls and pretty much holding them accountable for the economic disaster that they've caused. And we've also had, noticeably, a running of the political bulls, if you will, and that's the next folks that we need to get our hands on their horns and hold them accountable. The Bronxites helped bail out the banks, and they didn't return the favor. And I think that it's manifesting itself in many ways that Bronxites are feeling. And so we have Occupy the Bronx now, and it's powered by youth who are debt-saddled, youth who are unemployed, and it's showing itself on the streets very peacefully, I might add.
Why has this movement spread like wildfire? I talked about it being an international movement. Why has it literally gone all over the world? And while we do that, we have a lot of video to show. We pulled a lot of stuff off YouTube. So we have, just so you can see the size of it, Jane will be rolling video through the show. Here's some pictures of Times Square, so you can talk about the size of this movement.
Certainly. Well, it's a common denominator. We're talking about quality of life. We're talking about standards of living that have been deteriorating for decades now. And folks are just fed up. The frustration level has been boiling, and it's starting to boil over. And the urgency for change is here before us. And it's not about one party or another. It's not about the politics. It's about the survivability that people are feeling. And they're acting out in the sense of they're exercising their right to protest peacefully out on the streets without permits, and they're exercising that right to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the size of it, and you can see in Times Square right now, it really has caught on. I guess you have all these people, but one of the main questions that has been asked, what's the end game? What do you expect to happen here? You have all these people and everybody's upset. Everybody has something to say about it. What do you think is going to happen here as this continues to grow? Or is it just somewhat of well-intentioned but aimless kind of gathering of people?
Well, you've heard the phrase, we are the 99%. And I tell folks from my perspective, the 99% is vast. So to trim it down to 1, 2, or 3 demands and everyone goes home, that's not going to happen this time around.
Let's just be clear for folks who aren't aware, the 99% is the supposed 99%
of the working class.
Of the working class.
That's
because
correct.
The 1% controls the large majority of income in this country.
That's correct. And right now, even though Occupy Wall Street started a month ago, we're still in the education and awareness phase. And I haven't been, personally, I haven't been entertaining, neither have the Occupy Wall Street folks, drafting a list of demands. But it's clear that the banks are a problem that need to be addressed, and also the politicians who have been complicit in this development needing to be addressed.
You expect it will be looking ultimately for legislation? I mean, you know, again, everybody can say they're upset, and there's all different people being arrested, and there's a lot of activity. But so at this moment, in your mind, there's no play out.
Well, at this moment right now, I'm not empowered to speak on behalf of the 99% to say.
What would you like to see?
I would like to see the lobbyists out of Congress. I would like to see the Supreme Court decision overturned that makes corporations classified as a person. Mm-hmm. I would like to see campaign reforms on contributions, you know, regulations on micro credit card schemes, on the housing schemes, loan schemes, and so forth.
Professor, let's bring you into the equation. There's obviously larger political issues, but I'd like to talk with you about the specifics of the city of New York and how the NYPD has or has not handled this. When something like this happens, give us from the inside. The NYPD knows there's protests out there. They know there might be some violence. They know there might be control issues. You have people going in places where they ought not to be. You can't have people stopping traffic. You can't have people stopping the legal business of the day, even if they're upset about it. What is told to the officers on the street beforehand? How does the NYPD prepare for something like this?
Well, something like this is a massive undertaking. You know, we're a city of 8.5 million people, demonstrations, parades, you name it, we have it here in New York City. A lot of the higher-ups, along with the mayor's office, representatives, everybody else, will sit down with the PD. It'll be an all-hands type of thing. We'll open up our operations center. We'll make sure the manpower's in place. We'll give a strict and lengthy operations order. It'll have the allotment of police personnel. But the bottom line with this, Gary, is to protect interests of, you know, multiple groups. We want to protect the interests of people with their freedom of speech and their right to peaceably assemble, but at the same time of the neighborhood people that they could come and go freely. They don't have to listen to excessive noise.
If they don't want to participate in this.
Yeah, and also, but they're free access to the park. In many ways, a lot of the local people in that neighborhood felt as if that park has literally been hijacked. So we have to concern their interests also, their right to use the park, which obviously been grossly curtailed at this time. But in regards to the police standpoint, it's basically protect people and property. It's a basic mantra of any type of demonstration like this, protect people first and their interests.
With the obvious possibility that things could get out of hand when you're dealing with large numbers of people without permits and with people who are upset about something, is there any instruction to the cop on the street and to all the officers to say, listen, this is how the NYPD ought to behave. We're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Do not get out of hand. Do not use your weapons or your nightsticks improperly. Is there that kind of instruction, or is it just assumed that police officers who go into quote-unquote battle or go into this very difficult situation know how to handle themselves?
Well, generally, you know, we're trained to use force when necessary. You know, generally, deadly physical force is a last resort. That nothing will that down there, I should hope, would ever come to that, and I doubt it ever will.
To this point, it hasn't
happened, and hopefully it won't. But pepper spray and your police baton, you know, barriers have been set. We tell protesters, whatever, look, here's your area, don't breach the barriers. And as you can see by some of the earlier video from a week or two ago, people tried to breach the barrier, and that's when you would see police counteract with pepper spray in the police.
This footage that we have is all taken off YouTube. It's available to the public. We don't have anything exclusive. So let's roll some of the footage from the Brooklyn Bridge and take a look. Now, Ephraim, were you down there on that day?
I was not.
You were not down there on that day. All right. So here's the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, basically, what I want to know, and Professor Aloya, maybe you can help me, how did we even get to the point? And you can see what appears to be very random. Here's a police officer who is reaching into the crowd, and clearly he's getting reprimanded from his supervisor. How did we get to the point where we have people just standing around, and all it is a cauldron for trouble? I mean, if nobody was allowed to be on the bridge, why didn't they simply seal off the bridge and not allow people onto the bridge so that we didn't get into this circumstance?
Well, I don't know. What I gathered, it seemed like the overtaking of the bridge was an impromptu type of measure. We allow people to walk across the bridge. If they want to have a demonstration, actually protests in the past, we've even cordoned off a lane of traffic. But when people want to stretch across the roadway, you know, they're jeopardizing their safety. You could see that it's coming to a push comes to shove.
Let me just interrupt because we're watching now. So here's what appears to be happening is that they're simply looking into the crowd and at random pulling people they don't like or for one reason or another out of the crowd. Why would they do something like that in this circumstance?
First, you don't have audio with this video, but you have to understand, and a lot of people won't admit to this, whenever you have demonstrations like this, you don't simply have professional organizers, but believe it or not, as well as that was with Tompkins Square in the East Village in Alphabet City, you also have professional agitators that come in from the outside of New York City. Now, you can't know for a fact if that's what's going on. But you don't know if anybody's egging on the police in this situation.
I want you to just really explain this to me, because this to me is at the center of what I have seen in this footage and other footage. Even if people are yelling, shouldn't the police use restraint and say, you know what, they're allowed to yell. There's just no reason. The people all sat down. There's no reason to go into a crowd and pull people out and arrest them, even if they're calling me names or doing something like that. Is that the way the police should behave?
Generally, no. However, if they've established
generally, they should not go into the crowd.
I mean,
like
unless there's a specific reason to. First of all, you got to look at your safety.
Here's a guy they're just simply pulling out of the crowd.
But it looks like the people are also pushing forward now. What that guy did was, by grabbing the police supervisor's hat and throwing it, is totally inappropriate also. Now you just saw him take.
But if the police didn't go into the crowd at that moment and incite this confrontation, that wouldn't have happened.
Again, Gary, by the video, I don't see everything that's going on. You have to look at some of this video. People do chain themselves. People that put their hands through piping to avoid being. I have no idea what precipitated this, why this gentleman's being dragged out.
Ephraim, your thoughts on what you're watching here?
Well, just because something is legal doesn't make it just. I've told people that many times before. And you just saw the guy getting dragged. There's enough officers there not to, use that much force. They're being engaged. Augustine earlier just mentioned when push comes to shove, I saw the crowd pulling back. There was no pushing to shove back against. And they're being provoked. Like you said earlier, they should not have been allowed onto the bridge in the first place.
Well, that was my question, is how did this end up being a situation where these kinds of things could happen?
Well, and let me also share this. By deciding to arrest 700 people on the bridge, on that day, the New York City Police Department lost the initiative by trying to scare us into mass arrests. And if anything, the next day, twice, if not more people than the 700 arrested turned out at Zuccotti Park. An outrage to
what I want to do, Jane, let's end the video for now, because we do have people holding, and we should have done an hour show on this, because this is going to go, this is a very important topic. We do have somebody calling from Zuccotti Park, I understand. Jane, I have that right? It's Ed from Melrose. Ed, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Good. Are you actually downtown right now?
I'm actually downtown right now. I'm actually in a bank of all places. Just to make the call.
Could we make that a little louder in the studio so I can hear it? Good. Say that again, Ed. I'm sorry.
I said I'm actually in a bank right now because it's noisy outside.
What's going on? Is there anything going on down there at this point that you want to say?
No, just business as usual. Everyone going about their business. Holding their signs, protesting. The one thing that I want to say is that the police have backed off a little bit as far as being aggressively harassing people on the sidewalks for taking pictures or moving too slow.
Well,
And that's a little refreshing to see.
Ed, that suggests to me that in the past, a police officer has been harassing people or arresting people or detaining or whatever it is for taking photographs. Has that been going on?
And I was one of those individuals just a little over a week ago on the sidewalk. I've been documenting everything here on Zuccotti Park for the last 18 days. And I was just walking around business as usual. Sidewalk traffic was very light. And I'm taking pictures, and there were several other people taking pictures, but I was singled out by a captain telling me that I had to keep moving because I'm disrupting pedestrian traffic, to which I replied, I said, there's no one walking around me.
It's a little bit hard, folks. It's a little hard to understand him down here in the studio.
People are taking pictures every day, and it's exponentially more crowded, and no one is harassing them for taking pictures, so why should we be harassed down here for taking pictures? There's no difference.
Ed, is there anything else you want to say before we let you go?
No, just that the police really have to get their act together as far as their tactics down here, because what they're doing with some of the incidents of brutality is that they're creating a tinderbox ready to explode down here. It's like they're inciting the crowds to react to their random acts of brutality, like pepper spraying the women, like punching people at random, dragging people out by force at random from the crowds.
And Ed, you have seen that happen.
I'm sorry?
You have seen that happen.
I actually have seen the police actually dragging people just randomly from the crowd, yes.
Got it. Ed, thank you. Professor Aloya, when something like that happens, do the officers get reprimanded, or is it really one of these blue wall of silence? Nobody would want to say, gee whiz, an officer did something bad.
Well, you know, Gary, you have a lot of video and everything else down there. You know, obviously, on one side, you're trying to protect the interests of the protesters. But if you look carefully at video now, we have people from our legal bureau also filming the event. Because if people are willing to, you know, get the police or whatever, or engage in some confrontation where, you know, they're going to look for lawsuits, things of brutality, we also have our legal bureau filming. If the initial conflict is started by a civilian, now we have them on camera proving that they're the ones who precipitated this.
Let's go to the telephone and just say hi to Mark from Pelham Parkway. Mark, how are you? We have Mark. We don't have a lot of time tonight, so if not, I want to move on.
No, I'm going to I'll make it quick.
Go ahead.
First of all, I think what you're seeing in Zuccotti Park and Occupy, all these other places, is the little guys just tired of being pushed around by the big guys. Just two perfect examples of the Bronx alone. The water filtration plant we got shafted on, and Yankee Stadium. The parks that they're going to build, the people from the area won't even be able to use. That's just how the city has done it.
You're saying all of this has had a cumulative effect and leads to what Efren was talking about the bringing it to the Bronx.
And if you look at it now, what happens is when they gave the banks the bailouts, it's too big to fail. You should see I have money in the bank, and you should see what they want to do to me. What I'm getting is interest, and what they make off of interest is ridiculous.
Right.
The point I also would like to address the professor on one thing.
Sure.
From the law. There is a precedent, and there was 3 cases that were upheld already by the New York State Supreme Court where the city has paid. Police officers are considered professionals. As long as you don't put your hands on them, you can curse them, you could tell them millions of things that are disgusting. They cannot. And there was a case where a guy had his dog in Central Park.
Mark, I'm going to address that with the professor now. Our officers, Mark, thank you. Our officers reminded, again, in these circumstances, you know what? Don't make it worse than it is. Because in my mind, what I saw in that Brooklyn Bridge video, it seemed like the police were inciting the problem, as Ed from Melrose had said.
As a training, point of interest, to be a cop, you have to have a thicker skin to begin with. But, when you're holding a line and somebody's literally going nose to nose with you, taunting, there is video, and I've seen it, where the guy's just continually making faces. Now, that's not going to justify anything where physical force is used, but there's a certain amount of personal space you do need to hold the ground.
There was also video of a police officer saying, lovingly looking at his nightstick, saying, hey, my friend, you're going to get a lot of use tonight. That's obviously something that you or any trainer would never endorse.
No. I mean, that is certainly inappropriate. Right. I mean, anybody doing that,
Efren, you wanted to react.
Allow me to counter that a little bit. Commissioner Kelly's deputy commissioner and spokesperson, Paul Brown, has encouraged the excessive force that's happening downtown.
You think they have done that?
They've defended them. Already they've said they're defending themselves. When you turn a person who's not facing you around and punch them in the face full force, when you knock them down.
Video. I'm going to show that
when
video
when you mace against policy, when you mace females that you're not going to arrest, when you run somebody over with a scooter, these have been encouraged by their statements. And I'm hoping that DA Vance charges them with aggravated assault in all 3 instances.
Let's show this one piece of video. It's not very long, but we'll show that. Professor, take a look at this, and you tell me what you think. Now, this was just from the other night. Eventually, there will be somebody in green. I think you saw a quick glimpse. I think it's a him. Others have said it's a woman. I believe I read in the paper. There he is right there. Boom. Gets clocked by a police officer. They're going to show it again. Is there anything that would justify a police officer of doing that in that circumstance?
Again, I'm looking at the video. There's no audio. Not that a threat was made.
There's no way we could tell.
We know that, but is anybody attempting to throw something at the cops? Could there be a potential weapon?
Here it is. Here it is, right here. Whoops. They were about to show it. I guess they're going to show it again. See the gentleman on the he's on the left.
It happened so quickly, and you can't see.
And he's right there. Boom. But you see, shouldn't an officer, if the person did something inappropriate, take appropriate action to arrest them, detain them, and do, instead of literally acting like a thug in a bar? I mean, that's the way it looked to me.
Yes, but again, I don't know exactly what precipitated that. Right. If anybody has anything, look, there are demonstrations where people out of nowhere will start throwing rocks and bottles. I understand that.
There it is again.
And not to knock Augustine's assessment, but that's exactly what we keep getting. We don't have the audio. We don't know what preceded it. That lacks professionalism. And whoever the white shirt supervisor is went in for another punch with all those officers. It's assault.
Right. Do we have, in a general point, do we have a problem in the NYPD in general, or do you think this has brought out, this kind of unusual situation has brought out some kind of not great policing?
Well, you have to understand, we have a police department of 34,000 people. People say, well, is there any corruption in the PD? Of course. But is it systemic like it was in the 70s? Obviously not. And just like any other organizations, you're going to get your good, middle of the road, and just downright average or not so great cops. But for the most part, you could blanketly say that.
If you were a sergeant there and you saw that footage and somebody brought that into you, what would you do with that officer?
I got to know the whole story first.
So I want to know. You would bring him in and have him.
If it's inappropriate, not just supervisors, everybody in the police department is supposed to report wrongdoing. Now, like you mentioned earlier, that blue wall of silence, so be it. But if it's found out later that I was on the scene and one of my cops did something inappropriate and I didn't take action, I will be held responsible also.
Let's go. Let me just, Ephraim will give you the next shot, but Albie from Norwood wanted to say a word, and let's bring in one of our viewers. Albie, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I commend everyone for what they're doing. And I wanted to ask Mr. Cruz, what can we do to join the Occupy the Bronx?
All right, I'm sure he'd be thrilled to have you know about that. Explain a little bit more about the movement in the Bronx.
This past Saturday, we met at 11 a.m. at Fordham Plaza. We had 175 people, give or take a few folks here or there, meet us at 11 a.m. This coming Saturday and the ensuing Saturdays, we'll be doing the same thing, meeting at Fordham Plaza at 11 a.m. This Saturday, we have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s attorney, I'm told, William Pepper, addressing the General Assembly at the Plaza.
Don't you think it's about time, and you mentioned it at the top of the show, that there hasn't been this kind of real agenda? Don't you think it's about time, especially if you're asking people to join a movement, that you say, you know what, this is X, Y, and Z, what we're doing this? Or is it really just going to get larger and larger and maybe somewhat aimless before they really focus in?
Well, for weeks now, probably the last 2 or 3 weeks, as I've been down and talking to facilitators at Occupy Wall Street, they've been wanting the movement to become localized so that we can start addressing the culprits responsible, the local banks in the communities, the local elected officials, and take our issues and concerns that have been neglected or sold out in many cases directly to their doorsteps. And so that's what's happening at Fordham Plaza.
In terms of local elected officials, and I've read this on Facebook, and I've posted my own ideas about it on Facebook, we don't have any elected leadership of any sort, way up from the president all the way down to local officials. of people standing up, grabbing a microphone, and acting as a leader. Do you think this is going to happen, or there are so many elected officials who are really scared to all of a sudden look at the people who are funding their campaigns and say, you know what, I don't like you?
Well, I've seen a host of different leaders from throughout the city down at Occupy Wall Street, especially when the mics are out, and there are others who have been there repeatedly.
So they go there, but they're not ready to stand in front of the crowd.
No, some have. We have Charles Barron has been down there multiple times. I've seen him down there multiple times. Jose Rivera has been down there multiple times. Ydanis Rodriguez has been down there multiple times.
Well, although we should mention Mr. Rivera was responsible for some of the things that that Mark from Pelham Parkway said caused this problem. So let's be clear about that.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so some folks have been down there just on, superficially to get some press.
So you think is it a matter of time before they come down, or do you think it's still going to be a struggle?
I would like to see the politicians play a supportive role and stay behind the scenes, because it's too late right now.
Because it's much larger than
much larger.
Professor, if you were to, and I know you're not in a position to do it, but if you were to give the police commissioner or others higher ups in the police department some advice on handling this and dealing with this to, minimize trouble and criticisms of the police, what would you tell them?
Well, usually at events like this, we will meet with organizers, or they call themselves facilitators. We usually lay out the ground rules, say, look, we're going to give you your space. We'll set up barriers. You'll keep within a general area. And basically that's it. We're not going to tolerate any hooliganism or anything like that. Now, just getting back to the bridge real quick, you look at it from a civilian standpoint that, say, for example, somebody was on an ambulance going over the bridge. Now they hit a brick wall of people. What happens if that person dies in that ambulance? Who will be responsible for that now?
Well, the question, again, we're out of time to review it. The question was, how did we get to that point on that bridge? The suggestion has been that the police somewhat led them in, and then once they were on the bridge,
and they'll break off and do as much inconvenience as they
Ephraim, we got to wrap it up. Saturday morning, what time?
11 a.m. Fordham Plaza.
At Fordham Plaza. Anything else that you want to mention in 15 seconds?
15 seconds. I think the white shirts are the egos are getting bruised, and they're losing their professionalism on the spot.
We have a lot more to say. I'm guessing we're going to invite you both back, as well as many others, to talk about this over time. This is Augie Lawyer from Monroe College. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Ephraim Cruz from Occupy the Bronx. Thank you so much.
Congratulations on 17 years here.
17 years. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, what could be bigger than what we just talked about, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar, and you can see all our old stuff. Next week, we talk the environment. A recent magazine report explained that plastic bags are beginning to literally cover the earth. We're going to talk about plastics, in particular plastic bags, and what they're doing to our environment. Should be a fascinating and informative show. I hope you'll join us Monday night at 9 for Bronx Talk, and every Monday night as we go about our 18th year. Thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, Dina, and our cast of thousands who are around us here in the studio. They did a great job getting the videos and everything together. And to you, peace. Good night.